Well, it's a beautiful morning. I wish I felt as good as the morning is, but we'll persevere through a Spielman and Hooley podcast this morning. How you like the view from the back deck, sir?
Looks very nice. Can't hide money.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, you can't hide good, and Ohio State is really good, and they will play Miami of Ohio on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. We'll get to the Buckeyes momentarily and everything that Ryan Day had to say on Tuesday about OSU, including my question to him about where correcting without resentment comes from, because my impression of it was, maybe that's not something football coaches down through the ages have really prioritized, correcting without resentment. But he corrected me on Ohio State history.
Okay.
And the more
the guy that wrote books on it.
Yeah, and the more I hear from Ryan Day, I'm trying hard not to be a fanboy. I really am. I mean, I'm really trying hard not to be, because I want to maintain my objectivity, because I don't want to set people up for, the kind of disappointment they've had in the past 2 years where they had great teams and they had a letdown. I've said they're a playoff team. I believe they're a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I believe so strongly in them is shifting from their talent, their depth, their speed, their ability to their coach and to his staff, I might add. I got the chance Tuesday to talk to Mike Yursich, the quarterback's coach. Yeah. I've heard Jeff Hafley talk, heard Al Washington talk. Really impressive staff. Really impressive.
Well, you can be a fanboy. You can still be objective of what's put out on the field. I mean, I was a fanboy. I'm a fanboy of all the Ohio State coaches.
But your investment's different. You played. You wore the uniform. You gave everything you had for Ohio State. My investment over the years has been by requirement of a detached observer. First at the Plain Dealer and then in radio. I mean, some guys in radio are not trying to be detached. That was kind of born into me in 18 years at the Plain Dealer. So it's not comfortable for me to feel my alumni loyalty like I used to when you played, where I'd toss furniture around if you guys lost.
Well, I think there's that change that you've been talking about within yourself. I mean, I think there's a way to be able to be a fan and root for guys. Root for Ryan Day. I rooted for Urban Meyer like nobody else. Rooted for Woody Hayes. Still maintain your objectivity, because it's interesting for me, like when I was doing college football, people used to say, man, when you do Ohio State games, you are hard on that.
They say the same thing to Herbie, yeah.
But I'm a fan, and so maybe that's why I'm hard. And that's like when I do Minnesota Vikings games. I hear from Viking fans all the time, you seem so much more critical of the Vikings when you do a game, even if they win. I don't think I do. Yeah. I think people hear what they want to hear, but I can still be a fan. Like, for the example, Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they were awful. Well, I followed the Bengals my whole life.
Yeah.
So they were awful, and yes, it's still very possible to retain your objectivity and still want guys to succeed. I want every player, you've heard me talk about this all the time, I want every player to do well.
Sure.
I want every coach to do well.
Sure.
That's not the case. When they don't do well, that doesn't mean I'm not a fan of that person or I want to see demise come to that person, either personally or professionally. I want them all to do well. So I think you can be a fanboy of Ryan Day and still maintain your objectivity, because Ryan Day knows, like every other coach knows, that ultimately they will be judged on wins and losses.
Yeah, and I think, as I said the other day, I do think the test for Ryan Day will be maybe a bit further out than I originally thought. I thought, everybody thought, oh, he's losing his quarterback, and Urban's not there, and so 2019 is the referendum on Ryan Day. And I don't know why I missed this, because looking back now, you wouldn't say that Larry Coker's first year at Miami was the referendum on Larry Coker. I mean, they just rolled. And the next year, they got all the way to the title game against Ohio State before you started to see, maybe their prep wasn't exactly what you wanted. Now, I'm not saying that'll happen with Ryan, because it went off the cliff with Larry Coker.
Right.
I'm just saying, when you inherit a juggernaut, the referendum is not can you win with it. It's can you keep it going. And so this will be the test, I think, for Ryan. Will be 3-4 years out as the Urban influence ebbs out of the program. But I really like what I see from Ryan from a leadership perspective and from a staff perspective. He's gonna have a hard time hanging on to some of these guys because they're so impressive. Other people are gonna want to come and call on them.
I think that's what you want as a head coach, is to create that legacy or the quote unquote tree. And even though Chip Kelly, for example, isn't having success, Ryan Day originally is spawned from Chip Kelly. Now here's, and you talk about the referendum on Ryan Day. One thing that Urban did as soon as he arrived, I mean, John Cooper was great at recruiting, right?
Yep.
Well, Urban took, I think, recruiting even to a higher level.
Agreed.
And so what Ryan doesn't have to worry about, because he's proven to us, to me at least, that X's and O's, he gets it. You know, what have I always said about college football? Everybody that's coaching, 90% of those guys get the X's and O's, and they're going to put their guys in position to win. It's all about recruiting. For if I was hiring an assistant coach, before I look and evaluate his skills on the blackboard as far as writing plays up and how do you counter things and different schemes and formations, the first thing I'm looking at is what can he do in recruiting? Can he go beat a guy in Michigan for a great player in Michigan? Can he beat Michigan? Can he beat Notre Dame in a parochial school? Those are the things that I'm looking for if I were hiring a coach.
Yeah, and just charismatic-wise, as you sit and listen to Madison, Washington, Hafley, Yursich, they don't take a back seat in that area.
No.
Nor would Ryan Day. Now, we have a new feature here on the Spielman and Hooley podcast. You can always email the show, spielmanhooleypodcast@gmail.com. And that is a simplified way to review the podcast. We've partnered with pleasereviewmypodcast.com. We'll post the link in our show notes. It simplifies the review process on iTunes, and it's important to us that you review the podcast because, you know, we want to keep score. We want to know how we're doing. We want to know if you like it, things we can do to improve it. So, Spiels, we got 42 reviews so far on iTunes. 5 stars the best you can do.
Okay.
How many 5 stars do you think we have out of 42?
Well, you being the CEO, and I think, you know, people are listening to podcasts because they like the two people that are doing the podcast. So I'm going to say it's a high number. I'll say 30.
41.
Really?
41 out of 42. Somebody says we're not getting it done. 4 stars. 4 stars.
That's unacceptable.
That's unacceptable, yes. So, you know, we want to thank JPW Golf. He has the review of the day. He says, huge fan of Spielman. Chris and Bruce play well off each other. Always love their discussion about the Buckeyes. Glad they had other topics as well, including their faith. So that's important to us that you guys like it, and we'll hit on that as we always do later on in this podcast. But go to pleasereviewmypodcast.com or just hit the link in the show notes, and we'll get you going on that. All right, you were talking about ability to be a fan but be demanding.
Yes.
Which brings us back to the Cleveland Browns and their 23-3 win over the New York Jets. Now, when I did radio in Cleveland for 5 years at ESPN 850 WKNR, I was often accused of hating on the Browns, and I was like, I don't hate on the Browns. I just have high standards for them because I'm a fan. I'm trying to balance my wisdom from Chris Spielman. It's hard to win any game in the NFL with the Jets were bad and only scored 2 touchdowns against a really depleted defense. And I'm not sure that was a good enough performance to make me feel good about a schedule that the next 5 opponents right now are all 2-0.
Well, it's a tough schedule, including the Rams on Sunday night. My standards for Ohio State in college football are different from my standards in the NFL. Ohio State plays an overmatched opponent in Indiana, and they need to drop 51 on a team like Indiana and only give up 10. I remember when Ohio State was still winning games last year, they'd given up a total of 400 or 500 yards to the opponent. It's a different league.
Yeah.
Because there should not be a close game when Ohio State plays an inferior opponent because of the discrepancy in the talent level that Ohio State brings as opposed to the opponent brings. The NFL is totally a different animal, especially in the beginning of the year, because it's highly competitive. These are the best players in the world. For example, the Bengals. The Bengals look awful. I've never seen a defense look so bad and be so dominated in my years of actually analyzing NFL games.
That shows you didn't do any Bengal games last year.
Well, that's true. But I'm just telling you, when I saw Sunday
was bad.
And, you know, that's not me saying, that's the Bengals saying that.
Yes.
And if they're not saying that, then they're not being honest with each other.
Correct.
But they are saying that. Now, that being said, I promise you that it'll be a different Bengals team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, this Sunday. So when you take a look at Cleveland, Baker was 19 of 35. That's not good enough in today's day and age.
Another
NFL.
interception.
So he has to get better. One encouraging thing was the throw that he made to OBJ, not the touchdown, the one down the sidelines where OBJ made a one-handed catch.
Yeah.
That was such a beautiful throw that it was remarkable, the touch that he put on that. But I'm judging NFL teams by this. It's purely, Bruce, it's a win-loss thing, man. It is so hard, especially to go on a road on a Monday night when a team still has some optimism, a semblance of hope, although it may be small in the Jets' case, and you're able to come away with a 23-3 victory.
Correct.
And the defense was improved. So if I'm a Browns fan, I'm going to really learn about my team when they play the Rams. And if they can take care of the Rams, then I think it'll do wonders for their confidence, because we look at this Browns team, and there's high hopes, high expectations. Well, this is a chance for them to live up to those high hopes and high expectations. They had a must-win in Monday night. We both agreed to that with the Jets.
No doubt.
Now can they carry that momentum and propel them into the rest of the season?
I almost feel like the Rams game is a must-win.
Yeah.
And I say that because it's home, and then you're at the Ravens, who now the
So
Ravens.
that'd be a great game.
The Ravens will get tested. They have the Chiefs this week.
Well, they'll have their first loss this week.
Monday, October 7th, Monday Night Football again. Browns at 49ers. 49ers are playing well.
That's a good team. I'm telling you folks right now, the 49ers are a good team. Now, they lost their starting left tackle, Joe Staley, which could be a potential issue, yes.
Against
so
the
we'll
Browns,
see how
that's
that
a
plays
problem
out.
with
Yeah.
Myles Garrett. But then it's Seahawks at home. They're also 2-0. At the Patriots. And then the breather comes after that at the Broncos. And the Broncos on the road are never a bargain.
No, that playing in that altitude makes a big difference. So, I mean, I'm optimistic. I think defensively was where I wanted to see improvement, and we got that improvement. And I think Baker and this offense is still going to gel together, especially if you can get production like that from Odell Beckham Jr. and teams start having to take away OBJ. And then, of course, you have Jarvis Landry or Higgins or whoever it may be, and Njoku.
All right, Ryan Clark was critical on the Sports Center with Scott Van Pelt afterward that the Browns are too enamored with trying to feed everybody the ball and not running Nick Chubb enough. I don't really disagree with that. I mean, I know when you have Odell Beckham, I don't think you feed him because you want to further his star power. I think you feed him because you saw what he can do when he catches a slant. I mean, and the catch down the right sideline. I mean, the dude is a playmaker. If you got him, you better feed him.
There's a reason why he.
But everybody
paid
else,
what he pays,
I
and
wouldn't.
why you
Yeah,
give up what you give up.
I wouldn't prioritize necessarily Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, or Higgins, and all the other guys. In terms of, I'm worried about keeping them happy, or I'm worried about throwing it a lot. I would run Nick Chubb more. I think that would make them more effective and would help Baker Mayfield. I don't love the fact that he's got more interceptions than any QB in the NFL since he basically became a starter last year.
I don't run the ball just to run the ball. I think teams call plays in order, and depending on what the defensive philosophy is. If you have 8-man fronts and you're an NFL team, you better throw the ball. The Bengals were only successful against the Seattle Seahawks because they threw the ball 51 times because Seattle was giving them passes to throw 51 times. That was their only chance to win, because if you're trying to run the ball against an 8-man front, as Cincinnati did, they weren't going to even be that close. So a lot of times, whatever the defense is, that dictates what the play calling is. And the other thing with Baker Mayfield, I think he has a strong enough personality, which has been proven. I believe that Baker's going to throw to the open guy. He's got to be able to stand there and say, because this happens in any NFL locker room with multiple talented receivers or tight ends, they're always open, right?
Everybody's always open.
And all Baker has to say, I'm the quarterback, I'll throw to the guy who I think's open. End of story. Just end it right there.
But he did miss Chubb on the check down on the interception over the middle.
Yeah.
And he tends to kind of sometimes, I mean, I love his arm. His actually this year hasn't been there like it was a year ago. And you do have to force it in there a lot of times in the NFL, but I don't know whether it's decision making or whether that was just an aberration or whatever. But the fact that he's thrown more picks than anybody since he became a starter is not a good sign for this offense.
No, and that has to be cleaned up. That's pure and simple.
18 carries for Nick Chubb. To me, that's not enough. And one of the reasons why I say you got to run Nick Chubb more is because you do have Kareem Hunt coming.
Yeah,
After
18
8
carries
games.
is plenty.
You like that, huh?
Well, I don't.
I'd like to see him
Well,
22,
if
23.
we had a 12-game season, I'd like to see 22, 23. We
Okay.
have 16 games.
That's true. But I'm assuming when Hunt comes on, they're going to share because you have to get Kareem Hunt in football.
Yeah. Your point is well taken.
Yeah.
So we both have a good point. Two truths.
Two truths. That's right. It's possible.
If true.
You and I would love to see. Yeah, if true. You and I would love to see Master Teague and J.K. Dobbins share some carries. I mean, the Buckeyes against Indiana, phenomenal on the ground. I don't know. Miami of Ohio is so overmatched here. What?
Chuck Martin had the greatest. Chuck Martin's the head coach. The greatest line ever.
Chuck Martin's the head coach at Miami, and his assessment of this was
that it's like when you're picking teams on the playground, but Ohio State gets to pick the first 85
first
picks.
85 picks. Like picking teams at recess, Ohio State gets the first 85 picks. And when I saw that, I thought, well, he's not wrong.
No,
He's
it
not
was
wrong.
perfect. That was like that was almost as good as Mike Leach breaking down the Pac-12 mascots.
I saw that, but I didn't
dude,
listen
you have
to
to
it.
watch it.
Yeah.
And we'll have to play some
Okay.
for our listeners. Why? Maybe we'll do that in the next
maybe on
podcast.
Friday,
But
yeah.
it's really funny, and it's tremendous. I mean, I wish I would have thought of that.
All right, so what would you do if you're Ryan Day? You know you're going to win the football game. You go in. I mean, he kept talking on Tuesday about, the mistakes are there, the mistakes are there, the mistakes
has
are there.
to.
And finally I said, Ryan, come on. You said it 4 times. Like, what mistakes? And he went to technique and this, that, and the other. And I get it. And there's nothing wrong with being a perfectionist and striving for perfection. But you go into this game knowing you're going to win it. You got the Big Ten after that. What would your objective be if you're Ryan Day to accomplish against Miami of Ohio?
I want to be sharp for 2.5 quarters and get up as big as I can. Then I want to get as much experience for other guys as I can. I just need to be sharp and feel good about the performance of my frontline guys. Then when I feel good, when I feel like, okay, that's enough work for today, then I start playing other guys. So it's a great opportunity for the backups to get some valuable experience. So they will have that experience and that playing time just in case they're called upon throughout the year. But the first thing I'm looking for is not a letdown, a killer instinct, being sharp, crisp, and fundamentally sound and mentally sound. Once I get that feeling like, okay, that's a good job by my guys. Everybody out, new group in.
This is the second lowest priced ticket on the Ohio State
Really?
schedule, which tells you what Ohio State knows about this opponent. The reason why Ohio State does not play a Power 5 opponent this year is because, remember when they had the home and home with TCU, and then TCU asked out for just to play the one game in Dallas, which was supposed to be a neutral field, but I think they were surprised Ohio State fans took over Jerry's World. So that's why Miami has lost to Iowa 38-14. That game was 10-7 at halftime. They lost to UC last week, 35-13. Y'all know Ohio State beat UC 42-0. Their only wins over Tennessee Tech, an FCS team. They got a nice little quarterback. He's Blaine Gabbert's little brother. He's a freshman, so he's going to make some mistakes. But I don't know. Miami of Ohio, when I was a kid, they were a big-time program at the MAC level. They got to be a top 10 team several times in the 60s and 70s. And you'll hear on the broadcast on BTN on Saturday at 3:30.
Cradle of Coaches.
Cradle of Coaches. So I thought, all right, I'm going to look up the Cradle of Coaches. I knew some of it. But it is amazing the number of guys in succession that they went through. Sid Gilman, who a lot of people don't know. Tell them about Sid Gilman.
Didn't Sid Gilman? I don't know.
Sid Gilman.
Did he
I thought I had an NFL historian here.
Didn't he invent the forward pass or something?
Sid Gilman pretty much invented the forward pass. The Lance Allworth, San Diego Chargers. The NFL passing took off because of Sid Gilman.
I didn't know he coached at Miami.
He was at Miami for 5 years.
Wow.
Then one of his assistants took it for a year. Then it was Woody Hayes for 2. Ara Parsegian for 5.
Great Notre Dame coach.
John Pont for 7. And you're going, who's John Pont? John Pont went from Miami to Indiana and took Indiana to its only Rose Bowl.
Right.
So if you'd like cred, taking Indiana to the Rose Bowl gives you cred. After John Pont, Bo Schembechler.
That's right.
After Bo Schembechler, Bill Mallory.
Right.
Winningest,
job in
I think, was the winningest coach in Indiana history. Maybe Terry Hefner passed him. Not sure about that. Then after Bill Mallory, Dick Crum. And you may not know Dick Crum, but Dick Crum got Miami to number 10 and number 12 in the country. He beat Georgia and South Carolina in back-to-back years in bowl games, SEC teams. Then they had a little bit of a lull. Randy Walker, late Randy Walker.
Randy Walker was, I think, credited to revitalizing Northwestern.
And basically, Randy Walker brought the spread to college football, the spread offense to the Big Ten in college football. And
that's who Pat Fitzgerald took over for.
Yes,
Randy Walker passed
tragic death of Randy Walker. And Terry Hefner, the late Terry Hefner, passed away of brain cancer. 6 years at Miami, got Miami to number 10 in the country with Ben Roethlisberger. So they've had, and here's some other guys who've gone through there. Randy Walker's offensive coordinator, a guy named Sean Payton. Assistant coach at Miami at one time, guy named Jim Tressel. Guy who played at Miami. Two guys who played at Miami, John Harbaugh and Sean McVay.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of history, but they don't have a chance on Saturday.
1987, I believe, right before we went down to play LSU my senior year, Miami either beat them or took them down to the wire. We'll have to look that up during the break. Oh, wait a second.
During the break, there are no breaks. We're getting kudos for no breaks on the podcast reviews, so we don't want to institute any. Chuck Martin's the latest guy. He came from Grand Valley State, won 2 national championships there.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, is he a good guy? You know,
he is. He's doing a pretty good job. I mean, he was rebuilding from scratch, and Miami's a place where you have to. When you're rebuilding something, you have to give them time. And you look at their schedule, right? Who they're playing. They lost to Iowa. Who was the other one?
Iowa and Cincinnati.
Iowa and Cincinnati. They're building for the MAC. I mean, that's why these teams and play these schools, so they're getting toughened up for their MAC schedule. But the MAC, again, did pretty darn well this week in Eastern Michigan, I believe. Formerly the Huron, now the Eagles.
They beat
Illinois at the Big Ten.
Man, Lovey.
Illinois. I don't understand how they're not. I know it's difficult.
I don't know. Why is it difficult? You got players in Chicago.
You got players in Chicago. You can't keep them there because Chicago is a central hub, right? So you think of all the schools that can come into Chicago. Not only that from east of Chicago, but then you start looking west of Chicago.
Iowa, Nebraska.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
and you got to be able to keep those guys there.
Well, so then next week, let's look ahead to Nebraska. Since you keep your eyes on Nebraska, your nephew J.D. Spielman's a wide receiver for Nebraska. Had a nice career so far. J.D. is junior or senior?
Yeah, redshirt junior.
Redshirt junior. Okay. Adrian Martinez last year. Nebraska gave Ohio State a game in Ohio Stadium last year. They missed some things that really could have made it dicey for Ohio State. Blew a game at Colorado.
They did. I watched that.
Yeah, that was really
awful.
Disappointing. They were out with 17-0 at Colorado and ended up losing the game in overtime. I don't know why Scott Frost tried a long field goal with an unproven field goal kicker there, but he did. They lost the game. Nebraska, your assessment of Nebraska, Ohio State?
Much better defensively.
Okay.
Much better defensively. Better athletes. They're playing a lot faster. Offensively, if you look at Nebraska, they have a better running game. They're a better overall team. They just have to learn how to finish and learn how to win. They had a nice game. I actually watched half of it against Northern Illinois last week. Northern Illinois is usually a team that's pretty competitive. Adrian Martinez started the season slow. He's starting to get it and getting a little bit of a rhythm. I think it's going to be a nice test for Ohio State. What I mean by a nice test, if Nebraska can keep it under 20, I think that'd be a great effort by Nebraska. Now it's at Nebraska?
It's at Nebraska.
That's a great place, and it's a great experience for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And if you're an Ohio State fan and you have a chance to do a college football game at Nebraska, I highly recommend it.
You know who we should get as our Nebraska scout next week is our old friend
Woody.
from 92.3, Woody Johnson.
Yeah.
I wonder if Woody'd be allowed to join us.
He'll be quite optimistic, I'm sure.
I'm not sure he'd be optimistic. I've seen Ohio State play. He shouldn't
So
be
he's a realist. He's a Nebraska fan that's a realist?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. All right. Time for our Flashes of Fun candid comment of the day. Flashes of Fun We'll take candid shots, take pose shots, your senior pictures, very affordable pet pictures, you name it. Flashes of Fun will do it. Find them on Instagram. flashesofun.com is the website. So Ryan Day made the comment, at Indiana, we have mistakes. We need to correct the mistakes without creating resentment. I found that to be an interesting thing. I wondered where it came from.
Your antennas went up, didn't they?
Yeah, because I like that.
Yeah.
So here's Ryan Day, my question, gravelly voice and all, and Ryan Day setting me straight on Ohio State history. He's right. He's right, I'm wrong. I mean, I said Woody corrected, I said Woody wasn't worried about creating resentment. And he said, no, he's talked to people, and Woody's players loved him. And you know what? He's right. As I think back on that, the players with Woody that I've talked to over the years, I'm sure Jeff Logan would concur with that. Dave Purdy would concur with that. He was very tough, very hard. There were times they got exasperated with him, mad at him, laughed at him, thought he was an old fogey or whatever. But I do think they loved him. I mean, he did a lot of things for guys off the field. So I think Ryan is more right there than I am.
I'm going to bring you back into real town.
Okay.
Apparently you've taken over my body, and I'm about ready to take over
All right,
your
okay,
mindset.
go ahead. Sure.
It's impossible to coach a team of all the egos that a Division I program has without creating some resentment amongst your players. Because somebody always is getting a bad rap. Just because they don't talk about that they have resentment doesn't mean there is no resentment. They don't talk about they have resentment because the coach is a good coach and he's doing it your way. That might not worked out. Ask Tate Martell.
Yeah,
There's some resentment.
That's true. Yeah.
Ask any kid that transfers out of here because for whatever reason it didn't work out here. And how many kids with the mindset today will look in the mirror and say, well, I was just not good enough for Ohio State, or that wasn't the place for me. It's always the
I got
coach
screwed
didn't
over.
Yeah, that's the truth.
I got screwed over, yeah.
So you are not wrong. You are right.
Chris Spielman is telling me I need to be more cynical.
No, I'm not being cynical. I'm being realistic.
No, you are.
That
You're the mayor of Real Town.
But it's just impossible, and this is not an indictment on any coach in the history. My dad coached for 40 years. There's guys that loved him, and there's guys that resented him. That's life. That's sports. That's when you have an authoritative figure determining whether you can play something or not play. If you're not good enough to play or you don't get to play much, there is some resentment that's created over a period of time from a coach to a player. It's the natural order of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Oh my gosh,
Okay,
what
so
is happening? You're so nice now.
So I fell for that. I fell for that hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, I can't even believe who I'm talking.
But I did not fall
Am I being punked? Am I being punked somewhere?
But I did not fall for Freddie Kitchens' nonsense.
There you go.
about Myles Garrett, who got 2 personal foul penalties on Monday night. Here's Freddie Kitchens. This is the biggest bag of garbage I've
That's
ever heard.
better, Bruce. There we
About
go.
how they're going to work with Myles Garrett and where Myles Garrett's penalties come from. continue to work on his decisions. He doesn't have time to make decisions in the middle of a pass rush. Like the guy, I wouldn't tell him to change a thing. He's dominating. He's right on that fine line. I don't think he's at Ndamukong Suh level yet.
Different position.
The one thing I would tell him, he did sack Luke Falk once, and then like threw him over like on his head. Now you can't do that, but like wrap the guy, and I mean I think Myles Garrett is playing great.
You
and
can't land on a guy.
can't land on a guy, right? The Trevor Siemian thing was a tad late, but to take that, I'd rather have that penalty, and whatever's going to come because he has that mindset down the road, than to take that away and have him like pull off a guy and then have a guy complete a pass on.
So, yeah, I think there's a fine line, and guys are constantly trying to do this. I don't know Myles Garrett personally, but I do think that, as the more he plays, the more he watches film, the more he studies other guys and what their techniques are, you have to be able to avoid